If you've ever broken out the old Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, or used your favorite emulator setup to browse through your complete collection of Super Nintendo ROM files, chances are one of the biggest reasons for doing so was nostalgia. We can emulate the games, sure, but how well can we emulate the feelings? The dimly lit arcades of the early 90s where we could venture, never knowing for certain what new games may await. The magazines that were, for many of us, our only knowledge source of the new and upcoming games for home consoles. The exciting hunt for a new release game at retail when release dates weren't always clear and availability was by no means guaranteed. There's no emulator for that sense of nostalgia, right? Well, High Score Girl tries its very best to do just that. You may even come to appreciate it more than that NES Mini that you bought and never opened. Episode 1 kicks off with what will be the foundation of the whole series, gaming nostalgia. What better game to use than the game that is arguably the flagship in resurrecting the arcade scene in the early 90s, Street Fighter II. We are immediately introduced to the series' lead character, High Score Girl. Actually, no, he's not a girl at all. He's Haribo Yaguchi. Something of a legend in his own mind, locally at least, he's practically forsaken all interest in his schoolwork and instead pursues being the very best gamer he can be. Street Fighter II is the obvious platform to showcase his skills, and he is indeed quite good. We open with him approaching a 10-win streak, which is about to be foiled by High Score Girl. Well, maybe. Akira Ono is most likely the title character, but this could be debated. We can save that for a later time and episode, though. Street Fighter II, developed by Capcom, was released in arcades in 1991. While by no means the first versus fighting game, see games like Karate Champ, it is responsible for sparking a resurgence in arcade interest, and is easily credited as the foundation of versus fighting games as a genre. The original version had 8 unique characters to play as, which seems so small compared to most modern fighting games, but felt like a lot for the time. I always wanted Gao to be my main character, but I was never any good with charged characters. I stuck with Ryu. Not only is Akira Ono better than Haribo, she's chosen to play as the most difficult character to master, Zangief, shutting down Haribo's conquest and eclipsing it with her own 29-win streak, at least a few of those wins coming from repeated redemption attempts. Haribo cannot allow the 30-win streak and thus resorts to rather deplorable tactics. I will admit I had never heard the term throw jank before. I found it hilarious. I did try some guile turtling myself when capturing footage for this video, and it was fun. My luck was not as good with the throw jank technique. I was never very good at the original Street Fighter II. I was around 11 when it released in North America and was only able to go to arcades once or twice a week if I was lucky. Our local arcades didn't have nearly as many dedicated Street Fighter machines, and so if the arcades were crowded, there was no opportunity to play against the computer opponents to learn the basics. It was not until later, when it was released for Super Nintendo, that I actually got a chance to play it at length, and even then, I went the route of playing Ryu because he looked cool and had easy special moves. It never occurred to me that you could win matches without using fireballs repeatedly until much later on. The point is, these two are really good, and while possibly exaggerated, players like this did exist then. Watching them go at it was great spectacle if you understood what you were watching. It's touched on in the anime, but these were times when gaming was male dominant, and it was a bit of a surprise to see a girl running over the competition like this. We quickly learned that Ono isn't just tough in game, but has some fighting skills of her own, along with a bad temper when it comes to games not going her way. Best of all, we get an excellent nod to Street Fighter here with Haribo's knockout wail. This comedy spot is wonderfully followed up as we move to school the next day, with Haribo being asked about the word on the chalkboard, that word being underhanded, perfectly describing his tactics from the previous evening. We are then briefly introduced to Haribo and Ono's classmates before heading back to the after-school arcade visits, this time for a little Splatterhouse. Splatterhouse released in Japan in 1989 and in North America the following year. The influence of horror films is evident right away with the Jason mask from Friday the 13th. The game is also said to be inspired by the likes of Evil Dead and the works of H.P. Lovecraft. I found the game to be pretty challenging. I wanted to play further into the game than I managed to, but I got frustrated with the sewer type level at the end of Act 2. Lots of cool cameos and Easter eggs in the arcade as well. Athena from SNK, so many great posters, 1943, Gunsmoke, lots of Capcom stuff here. but we also get a look on either side of Splatterhouse to see the fairly easily to identify Golden Axe from Sega, and a game that looked interesting enough for me to figure out what it was. Seeing as it was a Taito game that ended in dash, I looked at a list of their releases between 88 and 91 and found it was... Kadosh is definitely a unique arcade game. Instead of lives or health, you're initially given a timer. This allows you to wander around the village. The game plays like an RPG you'd expect to see on a home console. I read that some compare it to Zelda 2 without the overworld map. I didn't get that feeling. It is similar, I suppose. You can walk around town, talk to villagers, and eventually find your way into action, usually leaving town to go into a dungeon. Fight your way to a boss and repeat. The game felt incredibly cheap to me. I played an emulation with infinite quarters, but I'm sure I would have felt too ripped off after maybe 2 or 3 real credits to keep going. The game was ported to the PC Engine TurboGrafx 16, and I tried it out of curiosity. It was fun noticing the changes, but the gameplay, while reworked, actually seemed less forgiving, and I may have overlooked it, but I did not see a way to continue upon death, making this game ridiculously difficult. It's a shame because it is a decent enough premise, and it does have hints of fun. We learn 2 things here. Ono doesn't like scary things, and Haribo is often completely oblivious when it comes to reading situations. Their paths are now crossing more, with Ono using her physical prowess to bail Haribo out of a beating he receives when trying to calm down some angry teenagers who aren't so happy about Ono using pervy moves to humiliate them in Street Fighter 2. If you didn't think Ono was great before, you have to love her now, right? Another day, another chance encounter, this time taking shelter from the rain in a candy shop that has a couple arcade games. If arcade games in a candy store seem unlikely to you, then you missed out on great times during the arcade eras of the 80s and 90s. I fondly remember the days of arcade machines inside of grocery stores or at the entrance to retail stores, gas stations, convenience stores, even in laundromats, having dedicated arcade sections or even rooms to themselves. This anime and the manga it's based on get so many little things right. Here we have our final 2 games of this episode when presented with a choice between Ghost and Goblins or Final Fight. Haribo tells us exactly what we need to know about Ghost and Goblins. Basically, it's really hard and unforgiving. Ghost and Goblins released in Japanese arcades in 1985. I'll admit to incorrectly identifying this game as Ghouls and Ghost, since High Score Girl takes place in 1991. I should know better, as it was never some strange occurrence to have popular older cabinets still around. In my defense, these games are very similar, with Ghouls and Ghost released in 1988, appearing just as much an upgrade or remake as it is a sequel. It has a reputation of being one of the most difficult games of its time, so even with Haribo's skills, it isn't the best game for playing on a single credit. It's also a bit dark with horror elements, so it doesn't seem like a game Ono would choose based on the Splatterhouse incident. Instead, they both prefer Final Fight, a personal favorite of mine. Final Fight is also fitting here because of its relation to Street Fighter 2. Final Fight was originally being developed as the Street Fighter sequel before switching to the beat-em-up genre, as what is believed to be a response to the success of Double Dragon. The same development team would then later come full circle by using some of the assets of Final Fight to make Street Fighter 2. Final Fight released in arcades in 1989 and was incredibly well received. The graphics were among the best for the time, especially in its genre, and it had gameplay to match. There's nice variety in the movesets, the enemies, and especially the levels. They're both quite good at it as well. As is the standard for Ono, she prefers making the game even more difficult on herself, choosing the larger, slower character and voluntarily losing her extra lives early on. I never knew about alchemizing, so there's more fun game trivia to add to the collection here. As episode 1 comes to a close, we have yet another great example of how the series threads nostalgia with a lighthearted tale of friendship, plus a dash of romance, and is capable of throwing in comedy when you least expect it. Ono's family is quite well off, as here we meet her personal driver, really more her guardian, Zia, a man who has no business driving based on the near-death experience Haribo has. It's a great show that can make an episode feel longer than it is, but in a good way. It's simultaneously slow and mellow, yet manages to do a lot of storytelling in a short time. The episode ends without any cliffhangers, but simply makes you feel invited to watch more. Watch more we shall. What new video games may await us in the next episode? Thank you so much for watching this review. Let's find out what's in episode 2 next time.